his picture of his bike and all of these others, it just represents a much, much bigger image of who these people are and what these people are trying to accomplish. And they're not disposable. We can't just drive by them. We can't ignore these things in our communities. We've got to engage, and we've got to learn about these people so that I can say, that's my friend George.
Welcome to Miracles from the Hill podcast, where we share raw stories that display the anatomy of God's grace here at Miracle Hill Ministries. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe. And of course, you can like, comment, and leave a review. To connect with us, visit our website linked in the description box. And now, here is our host, Ryan Dirk.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to the Miracles from the Hill podcast. We are excited to have you here today. I just want to take a moment and thank you for taking time out of your day to care about the things that we are passionate about. One of the best ways that you can help us is to comment or email us. Let us know what you're thinking. Certainly we want you to like and subscribe as well, so that we can keep putting out the best content that we can on the topics that we are super, super passionate about. Today, Katie told me to mention this. Our email address is podcast@miraclehill.org. So that's how you can communicate back with us. So we're back into our series on the experience of homelessness. And today we are joined by Jason Williamson. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. So Jason is the creator of the Through Our Eyes project that touches in a very special way various people who experience homelessness. We'll get more into the project in a few minutes. But we're going to jump right into your background. So, how in the world did we get to where we are today? Where did you grow up? What was life like?
Yeah, I grew up in Dolphins country. For the first time in a couple decades, I'm excited about the Miami Dolphins again. Not too long ago, my wife said, as long as I've known you, the Miami Dolphins have not been very good at football. And I said, I'm starting to think this is your fault.
So the sad news is that this episode will air after the football season. Mm-hmm. So this may age well, it may not.
I may be a broken man come next year. But I grew up in a small little beach city called Vero Beach, Florida, about halfway between Daytona and Miami. And I grew up going to a Catholic church with my mom. My dad wasn't really active in our church. Basketball was kind of my life growing up, and when I got to high school, I started taking photography classes, and I took every photography class in the state curriculum, and then we developed one additional one, and I did some internships at our newspaper in town, and was doing some writing and some photography, covering events. I actually had a talk show for a little while that I hosted with students from several other schools in our area. Just talked about issues and how they affected students, and those things were kind of my life. I was going to the beach, or I was in a boat, or I was listening to music or playing ball, and that was kind of it. And so homelessness was not really something that there was some in our town, but it wasn't incredibly visible, mm-hmm. And so it just wasn't a part of my life, and I went to college for photography. I looked at a couple of art schools, and then I realized that there's a lot of art kids that can do a lot of stuff that I couldn't do, and mm-hmm. I could just take pictures, and I was good in a dark room, and that's all I wanted to do. And I thought my whole life I was going to go to Florida State. I was going to be a Seminole. And then I went and looked at it, and I realized that it was way too big, and I didn't like Tallahassee. And so we looked at a couple other schools that offered a major in photography, and I ended up at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And
way away from the ocean,
and really way away from all the rest of my friends. Everyone else kind of stayed around Florida. my core group of friends. So I was kind of out on my own. And when I went to Winthrop, there, historically it was a women's college, became co-ed, maybe late 70s, early 80s, something like that. But when I got there were about 7 women for every 3 men. And it was great. I left with a wife. So I played the odds. I beat the house. And
Did you know that going in?
Yeah.
7-3?
Yeah, that was a big determining factor. And so, they had a great photography program. Somewhere along the line, I started realizing that people probably weren't going to pay me money to do the kind of photography I wanted to do. And so I picked up a minor in mass communication. I took some advertising classes and I really enjoyed that part. I like the creativity and just developing thoughts and plans and strategies for brands and things like that. So I ended up in advertising. I had a different career for about a decade, and I was in media sales. I was working with digital media in the early 2000s, and that really was at the beginning part of what we see today with digital media and social media and everything else. And so I worked for a newspaper company that grew and was kind of bought and sold a couple times, and eventually we had about 35 newspapers. And so I did a lot of corporate training and worked with our sales teams and all of the vendors that we partnered with for products and things like that. And really along those lines, got involved in church. I was saved when I was in college, but we got involved in a church once we moved to Spartanburg, and then went on my first international short-term trip, and that changed everything for me.
Tell us about that. What changed everything?
Just the idea that God could use the things that I was interested in as a way to get my attention. And I've tried to shy away a little bit from saying that God used me, because I don't know that that's fair. God equipped me. God partnered with me. God called me to do some things on this trip, but I use things because I can't do them myself. I use a hammer to drive a nail because it would hurt my hand. I use an electrician to do something at my house because I would catch my house on fire. I use those things to do something I can't do. God doesn't need me to be a part of telling people about Jesus. He chooses to allow us to do that. But I found out that there was a group going to play basketball in a mega city in East Asia. And one of my friends said, hey, the guy over there is going to, we were at a conference. The guy said, he's going to go and play basketball in a mega city. And I was like, man, that sounds awesome. Like, I love travel. I love basketball. And I didn't think I need to go and tell people about Jesus. That was kind of like the last realization that I had. And so we talked for just a few minutes, and I was literally leaving that day to get on a plane and go somewhere for work. And then prayed about it, and I called my wife on the way, and I said, I really think I need to go on this trip. And she's like, yeah, I kind of want to go too. I said, well, it's a basketball trip. You don't play basketball. And he said, they told me I didn't have to. That I can be a bleacher evangelist, and I can tell people about Jesus in a different way. And I said, man, well, that's awesome. So I got to this other city, and I was at this other one of our partner newspapers, and I found a closet, and we just kind of prayed together over the phone in this closet. And then I called the guy from the ministry back, and I was like, all right, we're in. He said, that's awesome. This is on a Monday.
Yeah. He
said, I need $1,000 deposit from each of you by Thursday. And I said, oh, okay. So, we didn't even have time to send out letters. I emailed a couple people, and I got back later that week, and I think it was Valentine's Day. We were going into a restaurant, and my wife was working in Greenville. I was working in Spartanburg. I'd just flown back in town. We walked up to the restaurant, and I was just in tears. And she thought, like, who died? And really what happened was somebody called me, and they said, we just donated $2,000 so that you both can go on this mission trip. And I just thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
So while I was there, it was like day 2 or day 3, I had a chance at this university to share the gospel with a guy named John and his friend Joe. And that really changed everything for me. I just realized that in some form or fashion, that was going to be a part of my life forever. And I had no idea. I didn't really understand my own testimony. I had no idea how to tell someone else about Jesus, because I was still trying to figure out how he was working in my life.
Yeah.
Even though by that time I'd been a believer for about 5 years, but I hadn't yet had somebody disciple me. That came right after. A guy that was on our trip started to disciple me and pour into me. And I just realized that, I needed to figure out a lot of things. And the leader of our trip, he said, look, don't worry about sharing the gospel with somebody. Like, you're going to do it and you're going to do fine. He said, if you think that you're going to mess up the gospel, you're giving yourself too much credit. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I can do that. And we shared with these guys, and eventually one of them became a believer. I was really excited about that. And a dozen trips later, back to the same city, we've seen a lot of fruit.
So you've continued to go back to the same city and do the same. So you come back from that trip, and did you feel a call to foreign missions? Or
and I didn't know what it looked like, and so every time I went on a trip, whether it was back to that place or in a different place, I just felt like there's this tension. Like, I need to come back and do the job that I had, but I felt like God was calling me to something much bigger. But every time I felt closer to making that decision to pivot to missions or ministry, like, something great would happen in my job. I'd get a raise or a promotion, or, something would happen.
Enemy is slick, Jason.
Well, God was very clearly blessing both of these things. And so one day in 2012, our company had been purchased, and the new owner, the new CEO, he had a corporate headquarters that was going to be down in Daytona. And we didn't know what the future was going to be. And I was on a Friday morning, I guess. I was in the shower. I was praying, and I prayed this prayer that I said, God, I want you to do something so big that I absolutely know that it's of you. I forgot to tell my wife about that prayer. So note to self: next time you're praying for big things, probably include
warn
your spouse.
Somebody.
Warn somebody. So Monday, I got called into our publisher's office, and he said, look, the new CEO wants to talk to you. One of the other corporate directors that was with the previous company is not going to move. And he said, who else can do the job? And he gave him just my name. So that week I got on a plane and interviewed. And a couple days later, we found out that he wanted to give me the job. And that was also the day that my second child was born. And so the joke was, that's what put my wife into labor. And we moved down to Daytona for a year and a half. And during that time, I still went on 2 different trips with our church from South Carolina. And I just, on the last day of one of those trips, I just knew, like, the corporate job was not what I needed to be chasing. And God moved us away from our church. God moved us away from a place where I was serving as a deacon. He moved us away from our core group of friends. And through that separation, we really saw what the other life would be, and that just wasn't the life for us. And so I came back from that trip, and I looked at my wife while we were somewhere on 95 and eating lunch, and I said, what do you think about moving back to South Carolina and making substantially less money? And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, I just think it's time. And so we talked about what we would do, and I kind of had a plan, and I thought, okay, well, maybe my church would employ me. That was kind of the dream job. Maybe our sports ministry partner would want to add on to their staff. That was kind of the backup plan. And then the third plan would be like, let's start a photography ministry and I'll just fundraise and we'll support ourselves. And so on the plane, I had put together a business plan on how we would do that. And, I thought I needed to do one of those 3 things, but God really gave me all 3 because I got a chance to work for the church. We still partner with the same sports ministry partner, and I've been able to do photography ministry places all over the world.
So how does the Lord start developing a passion specifically for those experiencing homelessness?
So we'll get into the Through Our Eyes project, I know, but we a few years ago, we published a book that just showed some images from our first couple of projects, and there's an introduction that I wrote. And when I was in high school, I mentioned taking all those photography classes. And for our final project, my senior year of high school, I met a guy who was homeless. He was waving a flag at the side of the road, and he wanted to. He's just looking for a handout. And my buddies and I were all there after a basketball game, eating ice cream at this strip mall. And so I went over and I talked to the guy and just engaged with him a little bit. And I just said, I don't really know much about your life. I feel compassion. Like I feel like I want to do something. I said, I'm a student. I'm taking a photography class. Could I photograph you? And he said, sure. And he told me where his camp was. And he said, that's where I could find him. So I told my photography teacher, and she thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
I told my parents, and they said, there's not a chance that you're going to go there by yourself. And so the project never happened. And I actually don't really remember what my other project was, and it really doesn't even matter. But the reason it doesn't matter is because it didn't have any value. It didn't have any intent like that would have. So I just sat on that for a while. And when I got my job working for the church, I knew that foreign missions was really, that's kind of my heartbeat, but I also needed to be doing more to serve in the community. And so one of our church members worked at the Spartanburg Rescue Mission, and she took me on a tour, and I met a guy who was one of the interns, and we hit it off, and we just talked for a half hour in his bunk, and had a really great conversation. I got a chance to see a completely different side of what I thought somebody who was struggling with homelessness was like. And through that relationship, God just began to put that burden on. And I prayed specifically before that meeting that God would break my heart for the homeless. And it was more than just a photography project that I needed to do for a grade. This was a legitimate compassion moment that changed a lot of my perspective. And so through those relationships, that's where, a lot more serving and a lot more engaging of the rest of our church came in. And it's where God started to plant these seeds that would become the Through Our Eyes project.
So shout out to Becky Castro.
That's right.
We love dearly. We love you, Becky.
Absolutely.
So what is your official job in the church?
Yeah. So I am the missions pastor at Church at the Mill in Spartanburg. We're on the west side of Spartanburg. We've got a campus in Woodruff, and we'll have a new campus coming soon over in the Lake Cooley area.
And so what is your, given your experience, I'm curious what your kind of philosophy of missions is.
Yeah, so our philosophy is that we want every individual, family, and small group to be serving in our community. And so beyond that, we know that there are going to be a number of people who will be called to go on short-term mission trips. I believe that the best type of discipleship in our lives happens on a short-term mission trip, whether it's in the States or it's overseas. And I feel like the reliance that we have during those 7 to 14 days on God and the closeness that we have with Jesus in those moments where we are in unfamiliar places and we need to rely on him for so much, I feel like that just grows us incrementally in our faith. And so we want to equip people to go on those trips. We want to build up future missionaries, church planters, disciplers, but it really has to start locally, because the people who are going to be best in a foreign context are the ones who are already sharing the gospel. They're already used to serving. They're already discipling somebody. And so those things matter the most. If you were to boil down the most successful people that I've taken to another place, it's the ones who are already doing that here. And so, I had family members that really questioned why I wanted to make this career change. And in the history of drastic career changes, it's never been easier than this, because I got the dream job of being back at our home church. I interviewed with the deacon board that I had walked away from, and it was super easy. And we helped build the structure of our Acts 1-8 team before we had left. And so now coming back, this is my 9th year, going into my 10th year on our team. And we've built an incredible team, but our focus is really on developing future missionaries and having people utilize where God has placed them, whether it's with their hobbies, their careers, with their families, their geography, their interests, all of those things, and connecting those to the gospel.
So let's jump into the Through Our Eyes project. What is the Through Our Eyes project?
So the Through Our Eyes project is an opportunity to put a camera in the hands of somebody who may be in a vulnerable situation and allowing them to show us their perspective in their life. So the purpose of the project is really threefold. Number one, it's an outreach that allows us to share the gospel with somebody. And in the case of our very first project, and most of our projects, it has been with somebody struggling with homelessness. The second focus is that I want to bring joy to somebody by giving them the opportunity to create art. I know that as a photographer, when I take a picture, I get a lot of joy out of that, but also by other people seeing it. It's kind of natural. It's why we post pictures on social media. It's why we look for a like on our family portrait or whatever it is. And I also just think, like, of all of the ways that we can worship outside of preaching and singing in church or even privately, of all of the different ways that we can worship, I can't think of anything better than photography, because an artist can draw a picture that may even be realistic, and it would come from their mind. A sculptor can make an incredible three-dimensional piece that comes from their mind or some sort of other reference. But a photographer, very literally, in less than a 60th of a second, can capture a moment that God created. That moment will never happen again. Whether it's a birth, a wedding, it's it's 2022. A gender reveal, that we didn't have those. We just told our family we're having a boy. We have all of these moments. The moment you meet a celebrity and you want to share that, a beautiful sunset, something impactful to you. We capture all of these moments with the camera, and it freeze frames everything. And I just think, what a great way of helping someone else also worship. But allowing other people to see your art brings a lot of joy. And then the third part is we have had it be a very impactful awareness piece for the community. The thing that the Through Our Eyes project brings, in that putting the cameras in the hands of the homeless, and what that does is that they have access and authority that you and I don't have. There's a photo from our first project, and it's of a mattress in the woods. And there's a great commentary about it. And the artist said that it's a lot of people that are transient or living outside of a shelter, they have more than one place where they stay, depending on what side of town they're on. And this was a mattress in the woods where he had stayed and other people had stayed. I have no idea where it is. Because I don't live in that world, I don't know where that is. I don't have the access to actually go there and take that picture. But even if I did, I don't have that authority.
And you wouldn't know what it meant.
That's right. I don't have the authority to walk into a camp where some people are. They would react differently to me with a camera than they would to somebody that is already staying there.
Sure.
Or somebody that's in that network. They have the access and the authority. As a documentary photographer, I love street photography. My personal exhibition that I had in the past was all street photography from other countries. But it's these little moments here and there, but I don't have the authority to go and do those things in that community like they would have. So we gave out 100 disposable cameras to the homeless, and we asked them to photograph their life for a week. The things that are important to them, the people they're with, the places they go, the belongings they have, whatever tells your story, we want you to tell us, because we believe that every person made in the image of a creator can also be creative. Whether you've done art ever or not, whether you've ever used a camera like this, simple disposable wind-up camera, it's a piece of plastic with film in it. And it doesn't rely on the newest iPhone technology or how well you can edit anything, because you don't get a chance to edit anything. And we believe that your story is valuable and that you just tell us your story. Share that.
Okay, so it started with you having an interaction at the Spartanburg Rescue Mission with a guest sitting in the bunks, and you were the recipient of the benefits of relational proximity, right? Like you are there. That's you right. are with a human being made in the image of God. How did God remove the scales from your eyes and for you to say, I need to take the camera out of my own hands and hand it to that person? How did that aha moment come about?
I think it was just breaking down that barrier of uncertainty. I think the general public, if they're thinking about homelessness, we probably all have an image in our mind, and it's probably false. It's probably a person with a sign. It's probably somebody who maybe looks unclean, is on something, has mental illness. And in pockets, some of those things may all be true, sure. But I think that's the stereotype. The difference is those people have names and backgrounds and futures and a salvation.
And children
right.
and stories.
That's right. And a salvation that's at risk. And so if we can understand that, that's not just this homeless guy, that's Ray, that's George, that's Susan. These are the people that we're around, and they're just as valuable as we are. Mm-hmm. And so once you come to that realization, the project became very easy to interact with people and to break down those barriers. And so every time we do this project, I get as many volunteers as possible to help us. And part of our missions philosophy is that we're never going to do anything by ourselves. I want to bring people with me because it's important to engage everybody. And this is a project that was so important that a lot of people needed to see it and have their hands on it. So every time we do the project, we have a team that handles registration. We have a team that gives everybody a T-shirt that says photographer on the back. I want to change their title. Mm-hmm. We don't call them the homeless guy or the homeless woman. They're our photographers. And so we change their title by giving them a shirt that says photographer on the back. And we have somebody who takes their portrait because we want to recognize the artist. Mm-hmm. We have a team that prays with every person that wants it. And we have an opportunity to share the gospel with them. And it's really impactful to have that group of people all caring for people. And these aren't folks that have always served with the homeless in the past. This is people who are getting their feet wet because they believe in the project, or they just want to go and serve somewhere. God has called them into that for some way, and we're changing perspectives little by little. And so we have a lot of touch points. When you give them the camera, it's when you receive the camera back. We have a panel of judges that curates the top 20. We'll boil down 800 pictures or more into a top 20. And that panel of judges is not just from the church. It's people that come from the homeless ministries in our community. We've had people from the media. We've had believers. We've had non-believers. We've had government officials. Sure. We've had a pretty wide variety of people come and have an idea and speak some insight into the top 20. And then we blow those 20 up and hang them in an art gallery for a month. And the photographers get a chance to see their picture first, but they title them and they also tell us why they took it. And so we hang them all on the wall. And our model in Spartanburg and in Greenville, when we've done the projects here, have been that every photo has a lockbox next to it. And we ask people to vote on their very favorite ones by putting money in the lockbox or scanning a QR code and donating online to their favorite one. And then all of the money that gets raised goes right back to ministries that take care of the homeless. And then we have some separate prize money that just comes from our budget that we will talk to the individual photographers and find out what will help them, and then we'll go and get those goods for them. We don't give anyone money. We don't want them to use it improperly, but we'll go and take care of them. Some folks in the past have wanted steel-toe boots so that they could go to work. Some folks have wanted car detailing stuff. One woman was actually getting a place of her own, and she said, I've got like towels and plates, but I just can't afford a TV, and I'd love to have one. We got her TV.
Yeah. So I feel like you're answering my next question already. So the question is, how does Through Our Eyes provide spiritual, emotional, and physical support? So I feel like talking about sharing of the gospel and things, you're hitting on the spiritual, and what you're just describing is the physical. But how would you answer that question? Would you add anything for spiritual, emotional, and physical support?
Yeah. So, you're never supposed to read the comments on social media posts. So very early on, some of the success of the project went viral, and I was reading this quote that somebody had, or comment that somebody had put, and they said the last thing these people need is a camera. And I thought, well, yeah, from a physical standpoint, yeah, like they need a place to shower and eat and stay. And like I get all of that. But I think the short-sightedness of that comment like made me want to double down and continue this project.
Yeah,
because for that week or beyond, this project has meant a lot to those people because they're heard for the first time. And so I think that's exactly what they needed in that moment. That if we can help propel somebody into their restart, then that's incredible. You guys have done an incredible job with many of your banquets. I've been to dozens and dozens of banquets, and there's always somebody who has a tremendous testimony how God's worked in their life. And they're the ones who are sharing on stage or in a video, or there's somebody that's speaking on their behalf. But unfortunately, that is still a minority of successes. So what do we do with the other people who are still struggling, who fall back into addiction, who may get incarcerated again, or still live outside on their own because of their own choices, or still struggle with mental illness or different things like that? And so I feel like this project represents all of them, and we give all of them a microphone.
Yeah, you're giving everybody a voice. You when you talk about the kind of the three benefits, right? The awareness, the outreach, and bringing joy through art. And then you mentioned giving them a shirt that says photographer. Like you are helping someone have a voice and have an identity different from maybe what the world's been telling them.
Yeah, that's right.
That's huge. Maybe they need a camera more than they need a lot of the other stuff that person might point towards.
Yeah.
So we'll use the D word here. So this is one of the things you're doing is providing dignity to people. So how do you feel like the project specifically addresses dignity?
Well, I think because we're expressing that value that they have and how important their life is and how important their experiences are, I think that provides them a lot of self-esteem, self-confidence, and a boost, and just understanding the dignity part. It's not me going in there with a camera wanting to highlight, or even like a harsher word might even be exploit the situation. And, I take teams to places like Boston and other large cities. And, we have talked a lot about like things that you can photograph while we're out, things that you should avoid photographing while we're out. And a lot of that is like, it's really easy to take a sad picture of a person. But like, what about the joyful moments in that person's life too? Like that doesn't represent all that they are. I think the thing that always surprises us every time we get back a batch of photos, it's not the brokenness. I expect that. It's not terrible living conditions outdoors. I expect that. It's not a walk to the bus station to get on a bus to go to work. I expect that. But it's the joy. And like that's the part that excites me the most about the project. And I think that's the part that gives them dignity in celebrating those wins in their life. It might be a selfie with a friend and a big smile. It might be their dog. It might be their child. It might be one picture in the current project that we just did in Spartanburg is just of the clouds on a blue sky day. And it just encouraged her so much. And everyone else really loved seeing that perspective. And, just because you might not have the same life that I have, you can still experience God's joy, and you can still experience how the skies proclaim his glory. That's big stuff.
Yeah. So walk us through coming up with the tagline, cameras are disposable, the people are not.
Yeah, so funny story about that. We had received several donations in the past from Fujifilm, that's kind of like the manufacturer that I prefer for these cameras. And they said, hey, we'd be happy to give you another 100 cameras. Would you consider not using that tagline? Like, we don't like to say that our cameras are disposable. It makes it sound like you can just throw it out. And they said, we call them single use. And I was like, it doesn't sound good. The people are single, or the cameras are single use. The people are not. It doesn't have the same ringtone to it. So I never really made that pivot. But we can. Just the idea is that we have this hunk of plastic with film in it, and whatever's on there is on there. Whatever's developed and looks like a good picture is fine. But just that these people are important. That I think we can dismiss the homeless so easily by avoiding roads. It's a joy for me to drive down Forest Street in Spartanburg. It's kind of like the homeless mile, because I can drive down there and I can see people I know and some that I would call my friends. And before the project, I would never drive down there. I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if I thought I was going to get like mugged or asked for money or what, but it's just people that need some help.
Sure.
And I think that there's two pockets of folks. You might be able to elaborate on this too with your experience here. But I think that there is a large group of people who will always need services provided to them by ministries, by the city, by churches, things like that. Basic human needs, a place to have a shower, a place for a meal, a place to stay. The poor will always be with us. We know that. Mm-hmm. Then there's another group of people that I think is a lot smaller that are uncontent with the way that their life is going, and they just need somebody who's in their corner, willing to advocate for them and walk with them as they try to improve their life. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that what we try to accomplish through the project is supporting both. I want to be able to provide funds for people who, for the ministries that need to support these other folks. But I want to identify some of these other people that are looking beyond and looking to the future and that just need some additional help. And I want to help walk with them too. And I want to celebrate with them when those things happen. So we have just finished our exhibition at the Chapman Cultural Center in Spartanburg. And this is exciting. No one knows this. You can be the first.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So the person who won, who had the most votes, is actually one of the residents in Spartanburg.
Wonderful.
Yeah. His name's George Young. And George took this picture of a bike rack behind the shelter. And on the bike rack were certainly a bunch of different bicycles, but then there's a moped, and in the other side there is a small kid's bike. And like, what a great perspective of the types of people who are staying at the shelter. Mm-hmm. You know, these bikes, and George's comments were really awesome. And this is a great testimony that you can be proud of your team for. George's testimony was that one of the bikes was his. And he said, I forgot how expensive bikes were. I hadn't bought one in years, but he didn't have a license at the time. He does now. He's got a car. And I guess he's since given that bike to someone else. But there's a moped, so somebody can get around a little bit farther, a little bit faster. But then there's kids' bikes, and you get to see that there are kids that are also dealing with homelessness with their parents. But George's testimony that he shared with me in the art gallery, he saw his picture framed in on the wall. And he said the beautiful thing about Miracle Hill is that they helped me through a really, really tough time, but I needed to come to the decision that I was going to allow them to work in my life. He said, I was a alcoholic for, I think he said 29 years. And he was really struggling with a lot of different things. And he said, though, that when he decided to come to the shelter, he needed to make a decision to put everything else aside and just kind of follow the rules and do exactly what you guys recommended and go to chapel and do the responsibilities and put one foot in front of the other for addiction recovery and everything else. And he said, now I've got a car, I have a business license, I have a landscaping company, and
praise the Lord.
Yeah, and he gives all of that credit to the Lord and to Miracle Hill. And you know, his picture of his bike and all of these others, it just represents a much, much bigger image of who these people are and what these people are trying to accomplish. And they're not disposable. We can't just drive by them. We can't ignore these things in our communities. We've got to engage, and we've got to learn about these people so that I can say, that's my friend George.
So, you know, much of society, there's a term, invisible neighbors, right? So much of society is not going to drive down Forest Street, right? They're going to pretend like that doesn't exist. We certainly are very passionate at Miracle Hill about what we refer to as ethical storytelling, right? And it's about the idea of, not taking advantage of somebody's situation or story, but trying to bring dignity to the human being and the value that they hold. Let's go a little bit deeper on dignity. So certainly people experiencing homelessness is clearly something that you're passionate about. It's clearly something that I'm passionate about. By doing this project, you are taking this issue, and you just said that we can't ignore it, and you're putting it forward for the world to intersect with, to be challenged by, their perception of, or how they are aware of it, or what they do in response to it. So why do you think it is so important for others to take time to understand somebody's experience, as you do in an art gallery in the middle of a downtown?
Yeah, you know, these art galleries, they're the folks who are in the art community are typically not the same people who are in the church community. And that doesn't mean that they can't be philanthropic or volunteer at places, but I think that likelihood decreases. And so it's an education piece. In order to put it up there, you think about your family and whether you have kids and you drew or you personally drew a picture when you were a kid. We hang them on the refrigerator. We put them up for all to see. And that's a really important thing for the dignity of the photographer. But bringing other people into the fold is so important for them to volunteer, to give, to pray, to serve, and to just have a conversation with somebody so that they can be educated on the right way to care for people. So I think back on our very first project in 2016. I started talking to people and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to give 100 cameras out to the homeless in Spartanburg. They said, do we even have 100 homeless people? It's like, yeah, there's 90 at the shelter. So I was only got to find 8 more. But there was a lot of naivety in what is actually existing. 35% of the homeless in the state are in the upstate here. I think we had 600 plus in the Spartanburg area. And at the time, I think there were over 1,200 in the upstate. And, it was a much more massive number than I think a lot of people thought. So by putting that in a place where you would come and spend some time observing, studying, interacting with art, now you get a chance to jump into somebody's experience. It's not a profound, abstract piece that represents homelessness. This is a homeless photographer taking a picture of their homeless camp so that you can see it. That's different than anything else. And so we've seen people in the art gallery explaining the situations to their kids. We've seen people weeping. We've seen people laughing. One of our photographers that was from the Greenville Rescue Mission on one of our early projects, he had a great sense of humor and a really tongue-in-cheek look at his own life. And he lived in his car. He had stayed at the shelter. I think when we gave him the camera, he was living in his car. And he had a sign, a cardboard sign on the hood of his car that said "Home Sweet Home." And his quote about it was, "It's my home and it's also my office. I'm trying to sell it so I can get a bigger office." And, it was fun. That was his personality. And he actually, I think his picture came in second that year, and he's the one that wanted car detailing supplies so that he could make some extra money and things like that, improve his life. And so, people went through all of these emotions inside the art gallery and seeing them. And you're putting these vulnerable, sometimes dirty, grungy pictures up in an art gallery that is typically very sterile and pristine. And so you really have to wrestle with it. And so on most of our projects, not only do we hang up the top 20, but we've put the camera body on the wall and printed a 4x6 of every picture that has come from that camera body. And in a very linear way, you can walk down the street in the footsteps of the photographer and see where they went that day. And that was incredibly impactful. People were really having to deal with all of that. And in the thousands of pictures that we have received in dealing with the projects in homeless specific projects in Spartanburg, Greenville, Raleigh, Fairbanks, Columbia, we have never once had to eliminate.
You went up and did it in Alaska?
Yeah. There was a documentary photographer who heard me on another podcast, and she wanted to do the project in Fairbanks. And so I went out there to speak at their exhibition opening, and it was 23 below zero.
We've got friends from Fairbanks, from the shelters up there, and I was talking to one of them at a conference a couple of years ago, and we have quote street homeless end quote here in the upstate. That's why we open up our cold weather shelters. Oh, well, clearly they have the same issue up in Fairbanks and Anchorage, and there are people that choose not to come in.
That's right.
And they sleep outside, and every spring when the snow thaws,
they find bodies.
They find the bodies.
That's right. And we experienced that there. There was a guy we had served at the soup kitchen that morning, and he had been released from jail the day before. He was former military. He was struggling with addiction and mental illness, and unfortunately so many former soldiers and veterans are. And he spent the night outside because he didn't know where else to go. And that night, I think it was 8 below. But, in all of these different cities and all of these different settings, we have never come across a picture that was inappropriate, that we needed to take out because of content. So it shows me that the photographers are taking it very seriously.
So if you hand out 100, Jason, how many do you get back?
Oh, goodness. If I could get back 50%, I'm pretty happy.
Okay.
Usually it's closer to 40%. We just did our first international project this summer in Uganda. We partnered with a ministry called Benjamin House, and they are a family unification ministry. They're not an orphanage or a group home, but they reunite kids with their families, and they also have a sponsored kid program. And so 82 cameras went to sponsored kids. That's not all their sponsored kids. They have hundreds, but they helped identify 82. And then the other 18 went to kids that are living on the street by themselves. No families, no mentors, no guardians.
Just surviving.
They're teenagers that are living on the street by themselves. And some are younger than teenagers. They're just trying to make a buck and survive. They've been separated by their families for so many different reasons, whether it's that they were sold into someone else's work, or they ran away, or whatever the case was. They're living on the street by themselves. So we gave out all of those cameras, and 11 of the 18 from the homeless kids came back, which blew my mind. I handed them out, and then there was a fleeting thought where I thought we just wasted 18 cameras. But overall, we got back 90 out of 100.
Wow.
Blew my mind. One of the most compelling exhibitions we had. And we couldn't narrow it down to 20. We broke our own rules, and we had 30. But we started with 1,900 photos. And so in most cases, we're probably around 40%. When we did the project in Raleigh, we handed the cameras out, and then there was a hurricane. So, right away, people's stuff got damaged, lost, destroyed. Yeah. And then people just kind of left, and, they weren't even in town to give us a camera back. So,
Sure.
You run into all kinds of things, especially with transient folks. And, we have the most success when there's a strong relationship between the ministry where we hand the cameras out and the person.
So 2 random questions. So of all these photographers that you've christened, do you know of any that have stuck with photography? Have any of them chosen to pursue that?
So there have been several that we have uncovered this incredible ability. For a variety of reasons. I think that most probably have not stuck with it because of opportunity. I think the thing that I would love to bring to a project is this next layer of follow-up, where we could even have some digital cameras available for them to borrow and go on a photo walk with them, or whatever that looks like. And just continue to use art as a mechanism of building a relationship and providing some healing in their life and some way for them to express themselves. But we have uncovered some really incredible photographers. There was one guy named Ray who, in our book, he had 8 photos. In our very first project, we were intent on having 20 different photographers in the top 20. Well, Ray had the best roll of film I've ever seen. 15 projects later, Ray's role from beginning to end was incredible. And he had 3 of our top 20. We immediately had to break our own rules, and we said, we just want the most cohesive overall project, and we can't remove some of these photos. It has to be seen. And so, we stopped worrying about how many one person has.
So where's Ray today?
Ray has struggled a little bit with some incarceration, with just some sinful responses to the situations around him. But I saw him not long ago, gave him a huge hug, told him I loved him. We prayed together. And so, he's still dealing with homelessness. He's still dealing with the weight of the decisions that he makes. But we've corresponded, just kind of pen pals back and forth while he was in a prison for a while. And, he was talking with guys at Bible studies, and he was engaged in the Word regularly. And, I think that he has a lot of potential. It's just a matter of stringing together a series of right decisions when stress and the world come up upon us, and I think that's a tough thing.
So in all these projects, you're winding up with this art show where you've got the photographers there. You have, I'm guessing, a fair number of people that are coming in that in no other part of their life are they intersecting with the experience of homelessness. And you're seeing them not just be faced with it through the photography, but literally being confronted with a human being that's standing there beside these photos that they've just taken. Have you seen any like strange, or maybe a better word would be beautiful, like relationships develop as a result of it?
Yeah, we've definitely seen some. Watching, and I think back a year ago, we had our Columbia, South Carolina exhibition, and one of the women walked in, and she had this incredible picture, really bright, vivid colors, and so we printed it like 4 feet wide on this canvas. It was the biggest picture in the room. And like, she just burst into tears because she saw it and was so proud to have her work in there. And it was very obvious because of her emotion, but also we had a portrait of her next to her picture. I mean, her photo. It was obvious that she belonged to that photo. And so people came over and talked to her and encouraged her. And, I know that the ministries in Columbia that she was working with, like, they're continuing to support her, but the others in the short term encouraged her so much. She had so many conversations that night. The man that I was mentioning before that had the car that he lived in, he came to the art gallery, and we kind of caught a moment that maybe we weren't even supposed to see, but we watched somebody put $100 bill in his lockbox. And I said, how does that make you feel? And he said, it was like a very interesting, paradoxical, joyful answer. He said, well, I'm a little embarrassed because that is my life. He said, but the fact that somebody saw a picture that I took and was willing to give $100, like, that's incredible. And there are people that we have seen have gotten homes, and we've seen a lot of successes. We've seen the fruit of how the Holy Spirit has worked in some of their lives. I've got some really good friends that we've met through the project, and they have friends that I've introduced them to and that are there to encourage them. And if they stumble, there's more people there to help pick them back up than they had previously. And, you had mentioned the disconnect sometimes in the two worlds that the photographer lives in and that the appreciator or the viewer lives in. And not all of our projects have been with the homeless. When we did this project in Charlestown, Massachusetts, it's with a church plant that we work with. And Charlestown doesn't have homelessness. Boston does. But in Charlestown, there's 3 groups of people. There's townies who are typically multi-generation. They've been there for a long time, 4 or 5 generations, Roman Catholic Irish, blue-collar workers, that kind of thing. There's yuppies or toonies who are new people, new money, younger people. Toonies, that's what they call them. And so they're new to the area, new money. And then the largest adjusted income housing project in Boston is in Charlestown. A lot of minority people in there. You'll hear different languages, a variety of backgrounds, things like that. Those 3 groups of people don't typically interact with one another, right, even though they live in a 1 square mile city of 18,000 plus people. So when we hand out the camera there, it's all about bringing the neighborhood together. And we specifically go to places in each of those areas to find each of these people groups and give them the cameras. And we've had a different theme each year, but then they go to the art gallery and they're standing there next to each other, interacting with each other for the very first time. And I remember our first project that we did there, a woman she walked up to a guy and she said, "You're Tom, I've been meaning to meet you." And I was like, this is exactly what the project is all about. Bringing people together that don't typically intersect. And, we want to give a voice to the voiceless. But this Charlestown project has been such a beautiful unification effort in that community. But we've also done the project with folks that have come out of the prison system and have been discipled. We're talking with a group about doing it with refugees. We're talking about now having another international project in England. And so like there's a lot that's going on. And there's a lot of people groups that I think could really benefit from receiving a camera and being given a platform to just have us look at their life.
So there's going to be some listeners that are going to say to themselves, wow, I want to get involved in this. But there's other going to be saying, Jason, like, I don't have a camera. I don't have an easy in. So what would you say to that person as they're going about their life? What do they need to do to show dignity and build relationship in their regular day-to-day life as they're going around, and they may interact with somebody who may just come from a different walk of life than them, or may have the experience of homelessness or addiction or something like that?
Just get involved. Contact a shelter that's near you and ask them to take you on a tour, just like they took me on a tour. When you see someone on the side of the road, safely engage with them. There's one of our photographers this year. He was from the rescue mission in Spartanburg. He recreated a sign that he used to have on the side of the road, and it just said, "Homeless, anything helps." And his description was really interesting. He said, I meant that. And he said, I wanted people to know that I was struggling. And I also wanted them to know that really anything helped. I'm not just asking you for money. I would love to have a bottle of water. I would love to have some food. I would love it if you would give me some socks. And, I love, and the second part of his description said, I'm not needing to fly this sign now because I have a job and I'm clean. Another great testimony of what's gone on at the shelter. But he has articulated what I think a lot of us don't know. And how do we interact with somebody? They just want to have a conversation. Just ask somebody, what's your story? What's your story? How can I pray for you today? There's no commitment in that. You don't have to take out your wallet for that. That's not even healthy. But all you need to do is just engage with somebody. If you think about when you struggle with something in your day, what do you need? You just need some encouragement. You just need somebody to pray for you. And how cool is it if I just met you for the first time at a Christmas party or whatever, and I just said, man, tell me your story. I want to know about who you are. That's what they need too. We don't have to have a seminary degree. We don't have to be a missionary. We don't have to work for a ministry to even have a conversation with somebody. We just need to show them a little bit of love and remember that we also have struggled, but we're all children of God that all need a Savior.
Amen. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you or the project, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, our website is throughoureyesproject.com, and on there is everything that you would need. There's links to our Facebook and social media stuff with Instagram. And, we did publish a book several years ago that has our first couple projects in it with our top 20 in Greenville and Spartanburg, and then some other photos that were like never seen before. And, that's there too. And, one of the things that we feel very strongly about is supporting the ministries that take care of the homeless. So this morning, the Through Our Eyes Project made a donation online to Miracle Hill for $1,000.
Oh, thank you.
And then our church matched it. So you guys have some extra stuff to help in Spartanburg and then also wherever.
Well, when this comes out, it'll be spring, but we're doing this during Christmas, and it is the most difficult time of the year around Miracle Hill, right? Our beds are full, our cold weather shelters are full, people are trying to get in, and this month that brings so much joy to you and I is the most difficult month for somebody who's got broken relationships in their family. So that's a great encouragement to me. Thank you for that. It'll be a great encouragement to the staff too. What would you want to be the key takeaway that somebody has after listening to you describe what you're trying to accomplish with the Through Our Eyes project?
Yeah, whether it's photography, it's basketball, it's, I don't know, whatever your hobby is, God absolutely wants to use that as a connectivity between you and Him. and serving people. God took my passion for basketball to put me on a mission trip. And I brought 30 pounds of photography equipment to that city because I didn't think I would ever be back there again. And I took all the pictures I could possibly take so I could communicate what life was like in that place back here. And then I've been back there a dozen times. But that was the Lord's timing and the Lord's plan. But God got my attention by using the things that I was interested in the most. Just look at what your life is like. Where do you spend your time and your interest, and find a way to make a ministry out of that.
I think that's a great way to kind of close it down. So, we have thousands of volunteers across Miracle Hill, and when I talk to people about potentially volunteering, they'll often make comments like, I don't have any skills that you guys could use. And my response to them is, I don't know what your skills are, but I promise you that the Lord can use them, right? So do you like to knit? Man, there's probably some ladies in our shelters that would love to learn how to knit. Mm-hmm. Do you like to make cookies? Well, there's probably some people over in the recovery program that would love to sit around and make cookies with you. We have a lady. She's actually now on staff, but she started volunteering many years ago by going into our recovery program and bringing adult coloring books and a bunch of crayons and colored pencils. And you could go down into our Overcomers facility back then. So you got to imagine for yourself, these are 80 hardened criminals to the outside world's perspective. And there'd be 15 guys sitting around the table coloring on Saturday. And the Lord used that, right? Like he used her passion for coloring to develop these crazy relationships. So I completely agree with you. What the Lord has equipped every single one of us, and he can use that, or he can call us and then equip us on the back end. So we really have no excuse.
Absolutely. And the best thing that we could really give is just our time. Every time I visited someone who's sick in the hospital, they don't remember what I said. I'm not a doctor. I can't heal them. They just remember that I was there. And whether in 5 years, these guys, they have no idea. They might not remember the picture they colored, but they remember this woman who brought them there and talked to them about their family or their sports team or whatever it was. And they just spent that time together. Somebody cared enough to sit with me. That's a big deal.
And she would sit in there for 4 or 5 hours coloring.
That's awesome.
These guys. Well, man, thank you so much for coming in. I'm sure people will go to the website and we'll link it in the show notes. Would you do us the honor and pray as we close for those that are out there this Christmas still struggling?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your goodness. God, you are enough. You are exactly what we need. You are what we need when we need it. God, we have people in our communities that are hurting and beyond their physical challenges with where they're going, where they're getting their food, all of those basic needs. It goes much deeper than that. We have people in our community who are separated from you. And God, I pray that you would do an incredible work of revival, and that your Holy Spirit would just be poured out on those that are dealing with homelessness. God, what they need first is hope, and what you provide is hope. And so combined with the hope that you provide and ministries just like Miracle Hill that can help them get on their feet, they could be an unstoppable force. They could completely transform their life because they have hope in a means that they didn't have before. And God, I just pray that you would do an incredible work to build them up, to provide more volunteers, to break down the walls that would be separating a person from serving or having a conversation or giving to a ministry. Get rid of all of those excuses. Get rid of all of the hesitations and just allow other people to get their feet wet. I promise for folks that are listening that you will be blessed because of the involvement that you've had. Trust the Lord in that. But God, I just ask that you would do an incredible job this holiday season as we're recording this. to encourage people that might be apart from their friends and their family and their loved ones, but they just need you because you are enough. God, for the listeners, I just pray that they would understand that as it's written in Philippians 2, that we just need to consider others more significant than ourselves, that we can serve somebody, that we can bring joy to somebody. And Lord, I pray that you would inspire somebody now to use their gifts to serve you, and that they would explore what that would be like. No matter what their age, God, as long as they've got a heartbeat, I know that it can beat for you. And God, I just trust you with this. I thank you for Miracle Hill. I thank you for Ryan's leadership. I thank you for all of the volunteers that make it possible and the staff. God, we love you. We trust you with these requests, and I just pray them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for coming on. Goodbye, everybody.